Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, three big stories. Firstly, Nikhil Gupta pleads guilty to plotting to assassinate Govt Singh Pannoon. But all is not as it seems. His plea may be calculated to prevent evidence of the Indian government's involvement being protected. Meanwhile, in India, what could be the world's largest people's rebellion ever against the government in history took place just a few days ago, and all kicked off by Sikh farmers. More on that in a moment. And for those of you who think our channel is being shadow banned and think it's all just a silly conspiracy theory, well, I've got news for you. We've got the proof that it is. Do stay tuned for that. All this and more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look through loads of your great comments which poured in beneath our videos last week. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, let's get underway. As I say, a lot to get through today. Three big stories. And I want to start off with this big news that Nikhil Gupta has finally pled guilty. Yes, the case has arrived, and the Indian national Nikhil Gupta has actually now officially pled guilty to orchestrating what's quoted as an Indian government 2023 assassination attempt on New York lawyer and, of course, leading Khalistan activist Govt Singh Pannoon. Now, as you can see from the press release here from the US Attorney's Office, the US Attorney for the Southern District of New York, a guy called Jay Clayton, and a senior representative, or in fact senior representatives, plural, of US intelligence agencies have confirmed now that Gupta pled guilty to all three counts. That's murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, in connection, of course, with his efforts to murder a US citizen in New York City. Quote. That all happened, of course, in June 2023. Now, 54-year-old Gupta was actually originally arrested, if you recall, in November 2023 in the Czech Republic. He was then finally extradited to the US in June 2024. If you do remember, there were all sorts of shenanigans, legal shenanigans, where he was trying to resist, of course, unsurprisingly, resist his deportation. Anyway, finally, they did get into the US, and now they're charged, and he has pled guilty. Now, at the time, suspicious murders and deaths of other Khalistan activists were occurring right across the world, whether it's Pakistan, even Italy, and of course here in the UK and of course Canada. And they're all revealed to be part of this global Indian transnational assassination program, of course aimed at taking out leading Khalistan activists and of course other critics across the world. And that does include names like Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Brampton in Surrey in Canada, and of course Bhai Avtar Singh Kandar here in the UK, believed to have been poisoned in Birmingham here in the Midlands in the UK. Now, India has attacked Khalistan activists over decades through various regimes due to, of course, a threat that the Khalistan movement poses to the India's Hindu caste-based hierarchy, and of course their goal, which is this Hindu Rashtra. Now, Govt Singh Pannoon himself, he was targeted primarily because he was a leading Khalistan activist, and he is, of course, behind this the current Khalistan referendum, which has been a huge success. It's been rolled out around the world, where the diaspora has been invited to, of course, cast their ballot for an independent Sikh sovereign state of Khalistan. And we do know that over 200,000, that's nearly 250,000 diaspora Sikhs are estimated. That's an understatement potentially. Are estimated to take part in the non-binding vote campaign since it started in 2022. Now, Gupta's guilty plea, unsurprisingly, will strengthen the Sikh demands for action against India's foreign interference right across North America and indeed across the world, as he was found to be orchestrating assassination attempts against so many targets. Remember, those were his words in North America when he was first arrested, when he was caught by that DEA agent trying to hire him as a hitman. He used the words, "There were so many targets in North America." Now, according to the US Attorney, the guilty plea also means Gupta will not be forced to expand on his connections to the Indian government. And this has, of course, been commented on. Here he is. This is the man himself. That is Nikhil Gupta with his handcuffs on. Now, interestingly, there have been commenters who've said Nikhil Gupta pleading guilty means that he can't and won't have to testify further about the Indian government's involvement in his plot to kill a US citizen. Wonder how they convinced him to plead guilty. Yeah, there is no doubt there will be all sorts of deals done behind the scenes. And he's pled guilty primarily to protect the Indian government. Because, of course, now that he's pled guilty, he's not going to go to trial. He's not going to face a whole barrage of lawyers and barristers, or the US equivalent of barristers, in court, who are going to be pulling his story apart and actually probably dragging out of him the involvement in, of course, in front of the public, the involvement of the Indian government. So it's, again, it sort of smacks of something, a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we're not fully aware of. But anyway, there is a suggestion that Gupta was recruited to carry out the killing through his criminal enterprise, his own criminal enterprise. Underlining, it's a long-term accusation from the Sikh community regarding India and the Indian regime hiring known criminals to target the Sikh community. And in fact, one media outlet reported that the court heard Gupta became involved in exchange for having criminal prosecutions against him dropped in India. So again, there are implications that all sorts of deals have been made behind the scenes here, where it turns out he's got criminal prosecutions against him in India, and in exchange for him basically carrying the can, that they'll drop those charges in India. And you work for us, you go about our transnational repression campaign, and we'll drop these charges in India. A little bit of sort of blackmailing behind the scenes going on. And of course, you've got figures like India's YouTuber, the army major, the ex-former Indian officer, Major Gaurav Araya. And of course, he's been on his YouTube channel talking about this all the way through. And even he's gone public demanding that the Indian government recruit criminals and mafia in North America to kill Sikhs in both the UK and North America. Anyway, statements from the US authorities also confirmed, and there's actually a big quote here, this is a really important quote, despite the fact that Gupta pled guilty to try and at least sort of protect and ring-fence the involvement of the Indian government coming out in public. The FBI did actually make a very important statement here, because they confirmed the role of RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, in this attempted murder of Panoon. And now, despite this, and I'm going to report on this probably tomorrow, last week, RAW's head, Ajit Doval, who actually happened to be head of RAW in 2023 when this went down as well, he was in North America meeting the Canadian Liberal Party government reps in Ottawa. An official US government communications named co-defendant Vikash Yadav, that's another name associated with this. Gupta is believed to have reported into Vikash Yadav in India. And he was, at relevant times, an Indian government employee. So in other words, there was this direct link between Gupta, Vikash Yadav, who was a known Indian government employee at that time, to plot this assassination. And this quote is a really important quote. I'm going to read it out. At the direction and coordination of an Indian government employee, Nikhil Gupta plotted to assassinate a United States citizen on American soil, facilitating a foreign adversary's unlawful effort to silence a vocal critic of the Indian government. The FBI will continue to aggressively defend the homeland against any foreign adversaries who target our citizens for exercising their constitutionally protected rights. This, in absolute, unambiguous, black and white terms, the FBI Assistant Director in Charge, James Barnacle Jr., has actually stated publicly, at the direction and coordination of an Indian government employee. In other words, by extension, the Indian government was behind this potential assassination attempt. This is massive. This is seismic. This is the US government, US law enforcement, actually not the government itself, although there is a slight nuance here. This isn't the Trump administration saying this. This is US law enforcement. Effectively, it is an instrument of the state. But this is the US state saying publicly the Indian government were behind the potential murder of Panoon. I mean, again, it's absolutely massive. Now, amongst the US factions prosecuting Gupta, and again, this sort of brings the story into more context, one of the bodies in the US government that brought these charges and were involved in bringing this to court and achieving this guilty plea was the National Security Division's Counter-Terrorism Section. underlining really the gravity of the crimes that India were carrying out in the US. This isn't criminal. This is the National Security Division's counter-terrorism section. That is an important point. Again, this was not treated as a criminal killing or potential killing. This was treated as terrorism. This is state-sponsored terrorism. This again is proving that the US government sees the Indian government and their actions through this as terrorism. Therefore, by implication, it is saying the Indian government are terrorists. This is really, really big, and a lot of media has not picked up on this. The Indian state is effectively being accused of being a terrorist state. Now, the exact incident, the arrest that occurred on the 9th of June 2023, when Yadav and Gupta, both working from India, arranged for an associate to deliver $15,000 in cash to an undercover officer, that DA officer, as an advance payment for the murder, according to this indictment. Now, the trial is obviously ongoing in Canada at the same time regarding the assassins who carried out India's hit on Najjar, Hardeep Singh Najjar. And no investigations occurred in the UK, though, regarding Avtar Singh Kandar's suspicious death, which again is an absolute stain on British justice and the British state. And that's even after Bloomberg News recently quoted UK intelligence saying that they were aware of India's plans to kill the British citizen in 2023. So again, you've got to highlight the difference between Canada and the US with the UK. Again, it's just a shame on the UK. So Gupta himself is scheduled to be sentenced on May the 29th. That's where are we now? February, March, April, May. So about 3 months' time, 3.5 months' time is due to be sentenced. And he could face up to 40 years in prison in the US for his activities on behalf of the Indian government. I mean, yeah, it's almost irrelevant to the story what happens to Gupta hereafter. He was just the patsy. He was just the hired man, the hired killer. He's at the bottom of this food chain, of this terrorist food chain. What really matters is this chain up through Yadav, Ajit Doval, and obviously by implication, Narendra Modi himself. There is no way that Narendra Modi would not have been aware of this chain of orders down all the way down to this guy, Nikhil Gupta, who's now carrying the can on behalf of the Indian government. There is no way that the Indian government, represented by Narendra Modi, would not have been aware of this plot to kill Hardeep Singh Najjar, to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, to kill Avtar Singh Kandar, and many others right around the world. This transnational repression program has very, very clearly come from the very top of the Indian state. And the US government, it's going to be interesting to see how the US government react to all this, because again, the FBI itself in this statement have very, very unambiguously laid the accusation at the Indian government itself. This Nikhil Gupta was reporting in to an employee of the Indian government. Again, it just doesn't get any clearer than that. Yeah, again, it's shocking. And again, the media have been surprisingly or unsurprisingly quiet about this. Obviously, it's right across social media. The media represented by people like ourselves, of course, are all over this story. And it is sort of been peripherally referred to in the mainstream. But I mean, literally, I'm talking peripherally, on the fringe. It is just almost mentioned in passing. But this is a massive story. I don't think people in the mainstream realise, or maybe they do, just how significant this is. This is essentially, by implication, this is the US government accusing the Indian government of being a terrorist state for targeting Sikh nationals, Khalistan activists. Again, it's all black and white. And this guy's pled guilty. He's actually pled guilty. So again, there is no ambiguity here. This isn't just some accusation that's been dragged out in a court of law. He didn't plead not guilty and then he's been found guilty by a jury. This is the man himself admitting, yes, I am guilty of what you're accusing me of. And essentially, trying to protect the Indian state by pleading guilty, but in reality, the FBI know it, because of course the FBI will have all the evidence, and a lot of evidence that they won't lay out into the public domain for reasons of national interest, and obviously reasons of ongoing investigations north of the border in Canada of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So once again, the implications are very clear. A lot of what's not being said, again, speaks volumes. In other words, it is very clear that the Canadian government, the US government, are both absolutely 100% aware that the Indian state is now a terrorist state and has been murdering their citizens on their soil. The big question then, of course, again by implication, is why are these governments, Trump and Carney's governments, not actually standing up in public and shouting the Indian government is a terrorist state running out of accountability? It cannot be a democracy. It must indeed be a banana republic if it is murdering political dissenters on foreign soil. But again, they don't. And again, this brings up this disjoint that I often refer to between law enforcement and the intelligence agencies, who publicly have now, right across the Western democracies, have publicly come out and said the Indian government is running out of accountability. It is a terrorist state. It is murdering our citizens on our soil. So they've said it, but the politicians won't say it. Now, of course, playing devil's advocate here, of course, they have very many interests to protect as politicians. And that includes a sort of diplomatic stance, where, of course, they've got to use a bit more diplomatic language because they have other factors to take into account, like economics, commerce, etc., trade deals. Yes. Ultimately, though, what do we in our Western democratic nation stand for? Do we stand for the rule of law? Do we stand for human rights? Do we stand for democratic principles? Do we stand to protect each and every single one of our citizens in our nations? Or are we more interested in trade deals? That's really what it boils down to. This whole story really boils down to that. Is it about trade deals, or is it about the rule of law? Is it about bringing people like this to justice, but not just these hired killers? It's the people who hired them, the money behind these killers, the government behind these killers. And again, the hypocrisy absolutely stinks, I have to say, amongst our politicians. And most of all, the UK government. Again, just to sort of bring this back to the UK, contrast, as I often do, the US government to the British government, and the Canadian government now starting to align with the UK government. Carney's government is, of course, choosing to brush it under the carpet in the name of trade deals. And again, I'm going to talk probably tomorrow about Ajit Doval's visit to Canada over recent days. Again, one has to raise an eyebrow when Ajit Doval clearly would have been one of the guys who signed off on the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He's gone and shaken hands with Canadian official representatives. Come on! You know, it stinks. It absolutely stinks. So, anyway, on that note, we'll keep tabs on this story. But clearly, we were right. We were all right all along. And we were ignored deliberately, clearly, by these Hippocratic politicians. Anyway, let's move on. Right. Gosh, this is amazing. And this, again, mainstream media, another big story. Just almost ignored by mainstream media. I couldn't even believe it when I uncovered it over the weekend. I thought, this can't be true. If it was true, surely the mainstream media, this would be all over. No, it wasn't. This is the story of literally one of the largest, essentially, people's rebellions against a state in history. It involved 300 million people. This is like the whole population of the United States, whatever that is. It's round about that. But this is in India. But I'm going to wind the clock back just a little bit. I'm going to wind the clock back a few days. But ultimately, it all started off, as always in India, as it always does, bless the Sikh community in Punjab. It is them. It is this community in Punjab that have only really ever had the backbone. Actually, no, that's a disrespectful comment to actually people in Tamil Nadu and other areas, and Manipur, that have tried very hard, and indeed in J&K, that have tried very hard to resist the state. But it is the Sikh community that have actually been the ones who really have been the most effective in standing up to state oppression. And likewise, the Sikh farmers have been always at that vanguard. They have been the guys who've literally risked their lives to stand up for injustice against an oppressive Indian state. Now, unsurprisingly, the farming communities, once again, the Sikh farming communities in the Punjab, have been subject to extreme police violence in recent days. As plans for protests, this massive protest, were met with, unsurprisingly, assaults, imprisonment, etc., police harassment, just before this 300 million people march took place in a nationwide strike. Now, on this, as I say, I'm turning the clock back to the 6th of February, going back a week or so. The predominantly Sikh-led farmers' union, the BKU, that is the Bharti Kisan Union, organised a protest march into Batinda in Punjab. Now, this march, this fairly small-scale march, originally, it was met with a violent blockade of 1,500 police officers by the Rampura Pull on the Batinda-Chandigarh National Highway. Now, in this relatively small-scale protest, officers randomly fired tear gas canisters and water cannon at the gathered protesters, which included, amongst many people, included Jagdeep Singh Jaggar, he's the Deputy Mayor of Patiala, and the State Secretary of the Aam Admi Party, the ruling party of Punjab. So again, there's some pretty high-profile figures at this one protest. I want to show you, this is pretty awful. A video went viral of Jaggar, this guy, Jagdeep Singh Jaggar. It shows him receiving what's been described medically as a burst eye. I mean, it's horrible to think about. This guy basically got a full blast of the water cannon in his face from short range. In fact, it's pretty much point blank range. It was deliberately directed at his face by one of these water cannons. In fact, this very water cannon here, where you can see my mouse, that is a water cannon that fired into this guy's face. And there have actually been reports of all sorts of injuries from tear gas and water cannons. Let me show you. If you are of a nervous disposition, I suggest you look away now. But this is this video that's gone viral. Just watch this. It's brutal. I'll just play it once more. It's just so you can just sense the brutality. Look how close the water cannon is to this guy. Everybody's just standing around, and then watch this. Bang! It's just absolutely unjustified, brutal. Look, everybody's just standing around. There's no violence going on there. There's no rioting. The guy behind this water cannon up here literally just saw this guy and thought, right, I'll take him out. Bang! It literally might as well just use a gun. That is how brutal that was. It's, again, in a democratic nation that is supposedly India, it's unforgivable to act like that. It's appalling. Anyway, now, back to the main story. The march itself was originally organised to demand the release of farming protesters who'd been imprisoned since 2025, last year, without conviction for any crime. I mean, again, we've been here before. I'll just show you a few more sort of excerpts from the press. Several farmers have been imprisoned last year without conviction for any crime, and they still remain in prison. Indian justice at its finest, once again. And there are other issues involved here, and it also demands the reinstatement of teachers at an Ardash school in Chowki village in a protest collaboration with teachers' unions. So it did start to bring in other unions in this sort of protest. But interestingly, and this is really why it became such a big deal, as I say, once again, it's the Sikh farmers at the vanguard of this that are really generating this. This is why the Indian state are so terrified of the Sikh community. This is why they're murdering Sikhs as often as they can get away with it. Because they realise it is the Sikh community that is the one community that will always stand up for oppression, that will always fight back and form the focus of rebellions, effectively. And this is why, again, they're terrified, because they know that the rest of India potentially could unite behind this vanguard of Sikh warriors taking on the Indian state and topple, essentially, the Indian state. So, when the plans of this protest broke, the big protest, various farmer activist figures found themselves with police at their front doors. Reports of dozens of arrests, which included incarcerating female family members of some of the activists. Again, a typical tactic of the Indian state. They don't just go after the activists, they go after their family, their innocent family members. Again, this is Indian law enforcement at its finest. And one of the representatives of the union, the BKU, a guy called Sukhdev Singh, he said, many of our leaders have been detained in different parts of the state. So there has been an overall rise in authoritarian-style police operations right across Punjab, and particularly against the government's critics. And it's been reported already this year. I mean, we're into nearly the end of February now. But the law enforcement, the Indian state, have been targeting all the activists behind this it's not militant, but this activist union. And of course, there has been a concerning rise in fake encounter police murders alleged by many Sikh groups, and they're saying that they're on the rise. But this particularly brutal and heavy-handed attack on the Punjab farmers last week was partly believed to have been driven by the government's desire to quell a rising Sikh activist influence on the rest of India. And when I was saying earlier about Sikhs being the vanguard, the Indian state are absolutely terrified that these Sikh activists are now going to start uniting, essentially a national rebellion against the Indian state and what they've been up to. And of course, it goes back even to the farmers' protests, the original ones of 2020 and 2021, and then the ones in 2023. Again, these had the potential to really snowball, to really grow momentum into something much bigger. And this is actually what was happening over the last few days. Now, of course, Narendra Modi and the BJP are terrified because this actually has now turned into a mass nationwide protest that occurred on the 12th of February. That's last Thursday. And interestingly, as I say, it's taken days for this news really to hit the mainstream. And as I say, it's not even really hit the mainstream. The Govt media have really played it down. Again, there's been almost this massive clampdown on news, and they've tried to do it globally. Of course, it's across social media. But again, the Indian state and this massive Hindutva media machine, has gone into absolutely overdrive to bury this story. And this story, as I said in the beginning, is massive. An estimated 300 million people took part in a nationwide strike. And again, you just got to try and get your head around the numbers here. We have strikes here in the West, and when they're big, they usually involve maybe a few thousand people, a few thousand. This is 300 million. This is the size almost of the US population, the entire population of the United States of America, essentially. This is the size of it. And you think of the population of India is 1.4 billion. So 300 million. That is a massive, I'm doing some quick fad packet calculations. 3 divided by 14. I mean, it's 5. It's 20% effective. It's nearly 20% of the Indian population went on strike. Again, it's huge. But it was driven, and the key here, it was driven by labourers regarding essentially BJP policies and trade agreements with the USA. This is quite interesting because, again, it's not just about farming anymore. And again, this is why the Indian state's so terrified, because it's now bringing in all these other groups, all these other unions, and not just union people, but now just ordinary members of the public, ordinary workers across all sectors have joined the strike. And again, not just about farming, but about all sorts of other things, but the united in one common cause. The one common cause is Hindutva BJP government. And again, this is why the government is so afraid now. And again, this is why I think this is a huge story, because this has the potential to gather momentum. Remember, I always talk about catalytic events that cause seismic global events. I always refer to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union. They happened just through unforeseeable, almost accidental catalytic events that ended up in a sequence of events that brought about massive seismic change, literally brings down governments. And it's events like this that have the potential to do that. So I'm jumping on this, again, as one potential catalytic event that could grow momentum. So many of Punjab's Sikh-led union and worker rights activist groups supported the strike and played huge roles in encouraging the demonstration. Now, Again, it was along with all this criticism of BJP's general day-to-day governance that they were campaigning against. Farmers groups also complained that India's recent free trade agreements with New Zealand, Europe and now the US were poised to ruin India's farming sector, as local markets would now be inundated by cheaper products. And it's ironic actually how, again, likewise, we have the same protests here in the West saying that these trade deals with India are going to flood our markets with cheap Indian goods. Go figure. So again, it's the irony is fascinating. Now, the General Secretary of the All India Trade Union Congress, a guy called Amajit Kaur, a guy, so it must be a lady, that was one of the largest unions that took part in the strike, she said, cheap American farm produce will be dumped in India, making it difficult for our farmers and small businesses to compete. Now, in response to the concerns from union groups, Modi's government officially says the deal will, in their words, expand exports, attract investments and strengthen strategic ties with the US. Great. I mean, it almost doesn't matter. What matters is that there are at least 300 million Indians who are not happy with what's going on in the governance of India. Now, further strikes are now being planned, with groups like the BKU, that massive union, and its Sikh leaders at the forefront of not just a Punjab pushback now against the government, but a nationwide resistance involving hundreds of millions. And again, I'm laughing because it's massive. This is, and it's astounding how the mainstream media are not realising the significance of this. This is massive. There's been all sorts of quotes. And I'll quickly quote the Sikh Press Association. They've actually said, the news of this violence against Punjab Sikh farmers and the information about hundreds of millions going on strike is being throttled on social media. None of this goes as viral as it once did, even when it replicates the same imagery and narrative which made these issues so important to the diaspora in 2020. In 2026, we're in a different world. Within that, there are many reasons as to why these issues are not as visible to the Sikh diaspora as they may have been 5 years ago. I have no doubt that one of these reasons is an increase in India's control on social media and searchable news content. That's a fascinating quote from the Sikh Press Association. And my third story, which I'm going to come on to in a moment, is about how we at Satluj have been throttled on social media, how even our own news is being throttled deliberately. And it is a concerning ability by India, this global reach of Hindutva forces, to really try and restrict news. And what the Sikh Press Association have said very clearly there is that just a few years ago, this massive strike would be right across the media. Social media would be blowing up about it. The mainstream media would, of course, be reporting on it. Here in the West, we would be reporting on something as massive as this. And yet, it's not going viral because it's just proving, once again, Hindutva is really trying its very best right across, even into Silicon Valley, to try and throttle news of this. We've got the proof. Stay tuned for my next story about this, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But even the Sikh Press Association have made their own statement saying, look, it's very clear what's going on here. This news is massive. It should have gone viral. The whole media, legacy, mainstream, social media, would have exploded with this. And yet it hasn't. So I just want to give a bit of an editorial on this as well. So last Thursday, India witnessed what is being described as one of the largest coordinated acts of civil resistance in human history. 300 million people, workers, farmers, students, professionals, right across the board, participated in a historic national strike. It was organised by a joint platform of central trade unions, the Samyukta Kisan Morcha, the SKM. The strike effectively paralysed India's national infrastructure. Whether it was the coalfields of Jharkhand, the refineries of Assam, to the banking sectors in Mumbai, the transport networks of Tripura, the message was united and it was very clear. A total rejection of the Indian government's economic and social trajectory. The immediate triggers for this massive mobilisation were several, and they were anti-people policies introduced by the Modi-led government. Specifically, the strikers demanded the withdrawal of 4 new labour codes that unions argue strip away workers' rights and job security. Furthermore, the agricultural sector rose up against what's called the VB Gram G Act. This is a new rural employment scheme that critics claim renders the right to employment ineffective compared to the previous legislation that was in place. But perhaps most significantly of all, the strike targeted recently signed trade deals with the US and the European Union. And these deals are viewed by the unions and the left-wing parties as, in their words, a surrender of national sovereignty, as they allow foreign agricultural products to flood Indian markets, threatening livelihoods of millions of small-scale farmers. But really, we know what that's about. It's all about the billionaires. It's about the ruling elite, once again. It's about the Brahmins. It's protecting Brahmins' economics at the expense of small farmers. And beyond economic grievances, the strike was also a defence of India's secular and democratic polity, with organisers accusing the ruling BJP of pursuing an authoritarian, majoritarian agenda that marginalises diverse identities. Now, the relevance of this strike to the struggle of Sikh farmers cannot be overstated. This strike, yes, was national in scope. The spirit and the organisational backbone of the movement are deeply rooted in the previous years of agitation led by farmers, Sikh farmers from the Punjab, the heartland of the Sikh community. And for Sikh farmers, this isn't merely a dispute over crop prices or labour laws. It's an existential struggle against this imposing authoritarian Indian state. The Sikh identity is historically intertwined with concepts like seva, chadi kala, and it's manifested in the creation of massive langar and protests at the protest sites that have sustained the movement for years. In other words, the very concepts of Sikhi are embedded in this rising up, this rebellion, effectively. Now, this story of this massive strike highlights the worker-peasant unity. This is a concept that Sikh farmers have championed. By joining forces with industrial workers, they've now bridged this gap between rural and urban India. And this is important because it's now creating a formidable front against Delhi's centralising power. Now, to the Sikh farmer, the Delhi government represents a distant, corporate-aligned entity, the billionaires, the ruling elite, the Brahmins, that understands neither the sanctity of the land nor the specific cultural and religious traditions of the Punjab region. The push, for example, for the seed bill and the electricity law, just 2 examples that they're rising up against, are seen as direct attacks on the autonomy of the Sikh farmer, forcing them into a state of dependency on central government and, of course, multinational corporations. In other words, all this is about the Indian state sucking the wealth and control from the local independent farmer up to the billionaires, the Brahmins, the ruling elite of India. This is once again taking control of India at the expense of the ordinary Indian, the ordinary Sikh in the Punjab. This strike brings into sharp focus a growing sentiment across India. The central government in Delhi is failing its constituent states. States like Kerala, Odisha, Tripura, West Bengal, the strike was near total. Almost every single state across India took part in this strike. It was massive, and it was often supported by local state governments and regional parties. That's important, because this means that Delhi is now losing control. Delhi is actually being disrespected deliberately by local government. Local government are seeing Delhi as not us. You are you, we are we. You start to see the divide. These are the fractures that is potentially breaking up India. This is reflecting a deepening north-south and centre-state cowbelt divide. This strike demonstrates that the Modi's government's one nation approach, be it one nation, one market, or one nation, one language, it's now coming up against massive, massive resistance. Many states feel that Delhi is prioritising its own political survival and the interests of a few billionaire oligarchs, the Brahmanical elite, over the diverse needs of all the other states. And the central government is signing these trade deals with the US or the EU without consulting the agrarian, the agricultural states that are most affected by them. And it's reinforcing the perception of Delhi as a colonial-style administrator rather than a partner in a federal union. And we all know what that means. The feeling that the Delhi government is not just letting them down, it's a hugely powerful force that is now gaining momentum. When 300 million people feel that their national sovereignty is being sold to foreign powers, that moral authority of a central government disappears. It evaporates. In the south, states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu have often said, and they've been out publicly stating, their tax revenues are being diverted to the north, while their progressive social policies are being undermined by central mandates. In other words, Delhi is telling them how to live their lives, but they don't want it anymore. In the northwest, the Punjab feels its agricultural soul is being sacrificed for corporate industrialisation. Again, all these states are feeling, why should we belong to this? We don't agree with this. This strike is a warning to the ruling elite. If the government continues to ignore these demands, it's going to turn, or it risks turning these economic strikes into secessionist or autonomy-focused movements. In other words, this is potentially going to lead to the breakup of India. As the BJP government becomes more ultra-right-wing, more Hindutva-controlled and more majoritarian, in other words, pushing for this Hindu Rashtra, the disparate states of India, and each with its own language, don't forget, each with its own language, its own culture, its own economic needs, they're going to start now thinking, the union isn't protecting us, the union is an oppressor. Why should we be part of this union? The conclusion is very clear. This strike is historic. It is a symptom of a deeper malaise in the Indian body politic. The farmers in Punjab, the Sikhs, they've once again provided a template for resistance that refuses to be intimidated by the Indian state's security apparatus. And now, by linking their specific agricultural grievances to a broader national struggle for labour rights and secularism, don't forget the constitution is supposed to be secular, they have challenged the very foundations of Delhi's central control. The historic success of this strike suggests that the Indian state is now at a crossroads. If the government continues to favour pro-corporate, pro-Brahmanical policies and keeps centralising power at the expense of state interests, this unity and diversity that once defined India is about to shatter. It's about to break apart. This strike isn't just a demand for higher wages or better laws. It is now a final plea for a federalism that respects the sovereignty of both the people and the states. And if Delhi doesn't listen, the 300 million people on these streets may one day soon decide that their interests are better served by looking after themselves. And this potentially could lead to this final fragmentation of India, where the centre can no longer keep it together. As I keep saying, catalytic events. This has 300 million people in India saying, I think we've had enough now. And it's not going to take much more than this. If this keeps building, the long predicted breakup of India is on the cards. It really is there. Khalistan. And people don't believe this, but Khalistan is now inevitable. It's just events like this you can start to see now how unhappy ordinary Indians are. Not just in the Punjab now. It's Kerala, it's Tamil Nadu, it's every other state is saying, you know what? It's just not working for us. And every one of these states has their own language, their own culture. They want their own autonomy. It's coming. Khalistan is coming. Right, gosh, the clock is counted down. I'm going to whip through my final story. This is important. There have been a lot of accusations, from ourselves not least, that we as a channel are being shadow banned. And over the weekend, I finally found a moment just to prove this, because I noticed over the last week or so, I did some videos that have been very specifically calling India to account. We're not anti-India, and I have to keep stressing this. We are not anti-India. We are anti-Brahmin, anti-Hindutva, anti-RSS on this channel. We love India. I personally love India. I've always loved India. I love its people. But I'm anti the extremists, the nationalist extremists, because of what they're doing to this wonderful people. So I've noticed that when I've done videos, and when our channel does videos that are specifically anti-India, the views drop off massively. You only need to look at our views over the last 10 days videos. We're getting comfortably over 2,000 views and more for just my general news videos. But as soon as I did a specifically anti-India video, the views suddenly just dropped into the hundreds. And I thought there's something, because I know my audience hopefully agree, are aligned with what we're talking about. So where's the audience suddenly gone? Yeah, it's not like they're suddenly not interested. Surely not. So I did some research. I did some statistical analysis with the help of AI. I went on AI, and I've got quite familiar with AI now. It's an amazing tool. And sadly, I can't spend too much time on this because I'm running out of time. But I did some statistical analysis on what is going on with our channel, just to prove the point, because I thought maybe it's my imagination. So what I've done, I looked at the last 250 videos that we have produced on our channel, including in Punjabi and in English. And I lumped, it's a very simplistic statistical analysis. I didn't want to get too technical on it, because I wanted firstly to understand it, and secondly to be able to explain it to my audience in simple terms, to see if there was a very simple correlation. So what I did, with the help of AI, I grouped our videos, the last 250 videos, into two buckets, let's call them. Group A were critical videos. These are videos with high intensity political titles, where I use words like apartheid, weaponizing the constitution, state repression. And these are the most controversial. And therefore, as anybody who's familiar with YouTube, the most controversial videos tend to be the most clickable, the most engaging topics for our audience. And then Group B, which are more neutral or informational videos. For example, updates on local Sikh parades, cultural news, agricultural stories. And these videos quite often break out, reaching, these tend to be, in normal circumstances, these have a sort of bit of a slow organic growth. But they're not very clickable. They're not clickbait, basically. They're a little bit more newsy. So in simple terms, one would expect that the Group A, the critical videos, these are the ones that potentially, normally, should go viral. These should see, and in any other context, Group A videos are the ones that usually blow up. These are the ones that should get thousands, if not tens of thousands of views, because they're a little bit more clickbaity. I mean, we don't design them as clickbait. They just happen to be a little bit more clickbaity. But so Group A, you should see normally, under any normal circumstance, under any other normal channel, you should see Group A views massive. They're the ones that break out. They're the ones that go viral. The Group B ones are the normal everyday news stories that should be, rumbling along at a fairly similar low-level number of views. What did we find? Here you go. Our routine community news in Group B outperformed our critical political analysis by 300 to 500%. So in simple terms, the Group B ones, the ones that should have just had fairly slow and low views, on average received 3,000 to 14,000 plus views. And yet our critical anti-India videos got between 1.1 to 2.5 thousand views on average. So this isn't just an anomaly. This is consistent over 250 videos, whether in Punjabi or English. So this looks at all our videos, and you can see the difference. Flying in the face of normal YouTube algorithm is that our anti-India videos are getting 300 to 500% less views than our other videos. It's black and white. In other words, there is a clear prejudice going on here. There is a very clear suppression in the algorithm that is suppressing our anti-India videos. And likewise, because I've been anti-India on this one, no doubt this one will have relatively low views. So it's not my imagination. It's not your imagination. We are being suppressed on this channel. Now, there are nuances to this, and I've got to, for the purposes of impartiality, and again, I can't go through into much detail about this because we're running out of time. Let me just skip through. I'm just trying to find a few sort of explanations behind this. One of the arguments is that, in defense of YouTube, is that it's all about advertising. It's all about commercial interests. And the argument from YouTube is that if you contain anything that is slightly controversial, it's going to damage its advertising revenue, because advertisers might not want to be associated with controversial views or controversial videos, and therefore the advertising potential of those videos is lower. Therefore, their algorithm reduces the views. It doesn't pop up these, it doesn't suggest these videos to other audiences that it otherwise normally would do. In other words, it's saying that shadow banning isn't a deliberate targeting of people like us because we're anti-India. It's just saying because your views are potentially controversial, it actually damages the advertising potential, and therefore we will restrict you to your core audience. It's a bit of a weak argument. I get it, and I'll repeat that argument just for the point of impartiality. But ultimately, it does. It's in black and white here. It's very clear that our videos, particularly our anti-India videos, are being deliberately algorithmically suppressed. Now, that is either because there's a commercial argument on behalf of YouTube, or there's a political argument because the Indian agents within YouTube, Google, don't want these views to go mainstream. They don't want them to go viral. They don't want stuff that we talk about, where we're holding the Indian government to account, to go viral. You make up your own mind. Let me know your thoughts on this. As I say, wow. I'm pleased in many ways because it vindicates everything that we've been suspicious about. It vindicates you guys out there who've had comments disappear. There's no explanation to that, and I still can't find any explanation to that other than clearly there's something going on behind the scenes. Clearly, I suspect linked to this whole algorithmic prejudice. And we've got indisputable proof that your comments are disappearing. Many of you have been in contact proving with actual screenshot proof that your comments are disappearing. They're there 1 minute and they're gone the next. And I can see it from our side, from the administrator's side. Comments that you've put up, we don't have. They're not officially logged in our system. So something is blocking your comments as well. So again, if you can get them through, let me know your thoughts on this. Again, you can either comment or you can message me directly. So, right, I have only a few minutes to flick through our comments, sadly, because again, there's some wonderful comments. But the theme of today's comments is very consistent. It's all about Indian justice. And this is the reason why Khalistan's coming. Because there are so many people who understand what's going on in India. People like, and sadly I can't translate your Punjabi name, but you know who you are, thank you. India doesn't like justice. I don't even need to say any more, really, do I? India just doesn't like justice, unless it serves its own favourites. As you rightly say, India is just putting hardcore criminals don't go to jail, but anybody who actually happens to stand up for freedom, democracy, justice gets sent to prison pretty much forevermore. Punjab needs help as much as it can. It needs to get out of India. Every single person who likes justice would like Punjab to get its freedom from India. We always reach the same conclusion. Stay safe says the same. It's adhering to its Hindu nationalism, its Hindutva agenda. So of course it's got biases against Sikhs. It's unsurprisingly. Indian courts are rigged with collective structural bias. As you call it, groupthink. It's not groupthink, it's Hindutva. It's nothing more than a Brahmanical ruling elite who want to turn India into its Hindu Rashtra at the expense of everybody else. Satnam Khalsa, great suggestion. Once Khalistan is up and operating, all will be well. Absolutely. Thank heavens it will be. And it's coming soon, don't worry. The question is how to bring it into action. Well, momentum's gathering. Maybe start, this is an interesting suggestion, start as a de facto state in every village, ruling under a 5-member committee that follows an official handbook on Khalsa rules. It should be published soon and dished out. And he's saying, yeah, talk to Dr. Grewal. He's probably got one already. I will have a chat with him. He'll have seen this comment. Because I know he watches the channel and he does read the comments. But yeah, I think what you're suggesting is basically let's start it. Let's get all the villages operating their own almost semi-autonomy. Let's have the villages using a Khalsa rules handbook to run their own local society. So it almost by default, Khalistan actually sort of falls into place. I think it's probably not going to happen like that. Great suggestion though. I did a quick short again on Jagtar Singh Johal. Justice delayed, justice denied isn't just particular to India. It's here in the UK as well. Jagtar Singh Johal. What's the British government doing about it? As you rightly say, Ravinder, Indian government is not doing justice for Johal. India doesn't like justice for innocents, but criminals let loose on the roads. Absolutely. Apparently their excuse that the courts are packed says stay safe. Nonsense. It's just India doesn't like justice. India does not have a functioning justice system. India's a joke, as S. Bain says. To think that anyone thinks that this is a serious country, it's the same person you can sell anything like Hindutva. Again, you can see the comments are consistent. We all see India as a wonderful country full of wonderful people, but ruled by people who are idiots. They're not idiots. They're actually people who just do not respect the rule of law. They want to control India for their own benefit, not for the benefit of the ordinary people. Hatareki, how can you expect justice from those who are ruling over India with 90% of criminals of them have got criminal records themselves? Yeah, it's not actually 90%, but I remember doing a story on this a couple of years ago, where actually the number of politicians in the Lok Sabha who have criminal records, and actually in the government itself who have criminal records, is astounding. I forget the actual number, but there's a huge percentage of the Indian government are criminals, have a criminal record. It's just unbelievable. As Gill says, an India, not justice for Sikhs. Yeah, India as it stands is never going to bring justice for Sikhs. Now, I do want a quick coverage. I might tomorrow, if we've got time, do a story on remember the ICE raid on the Gurdwara in New Jersey I reported on at the end of last week. As it turns out, it looks like there may have been a miscommunication. Apparently, it was not a raid by ICE. Apparently, there was a bit of a miscommunication by the Gurdwara. I think people got a little they've tripped over themselves in trying to make accusations. I'll hopefully talk about this tomorrow. But understandably, there was a bit of a backlash, a large backlash. Cam K says, ICE should understand. Sikhs are law-abiding and peaceful citizens. Everywhere, doesn't matter where they are always, generally speaking, there are a few bad apples, let's be fair, but ultimately the Sikh community as a whole, certainly those Sikhs that follow Sikhi, are peaceful and law-abiding. Have they forgotten when tens of LA police vehicles paid homage at Gurdwara to recognise the local community's seva to humanity during COVID? And again, it's not just during COVID. At any times of national crisis or international crisis, it's the Sikh community that are always there on the front line. This comment made me laugh. Soy boys unite. Deport the illegals, then the rioters and fraudsters, and then the mainstream media. Yes, I think that's something I'm sure our audience actually, and myself certainly, agree with. Let's deport the bloody mainstream media. They're behind a lot of these problems. The mainstream media represent the corrupt establishment. And yes, I use that word deliberately, in the West as well. Our own corrupt establishments that control our own mainstream media. This is why mainstream media is dying. Our mainstream media, right across the Western world, and by that I also include the Southern Hemisphere as well, Our mainstream media is dying because people don't believe it anymore. Thank the internet. Thank, ironically, YouTube. Thank social media. People are waking up. People have rejected what is now called the legacy media. This term legacy media now has replaced mainstream media because the legacy media means it's old-fashioned, it's gone, it's dead. That is what the mainstream media is now. It's dead. A few people, particularly the older generations, ironically, still watch the legacy media because they've been brought up to believe it. But the young now, they're not watching the legacy media. They're watching people like us. They're going on YouTube, social media. They're getting their news from hundreds of different sources because they do not believe what they are spoon-fed by propaganda states like India. Even our own states here in the UK, in North America. The young, they don't believe the legacy media, the mainstream media. They know they are propaganda outlets for our own governments, our own ruling elite. The world's changing. It's a fascinating time to be alive. Baz Randhawa says, Ikahol Khalistan, vote for Khalistan. I couldn't put it better myself. Thank you for that. Bringing me on to my final page as we round the hour mark. Shivraj Sandhu, love your show, Angus. Well, I love your comments. Thank you to all of you. I love the audience. I can't do this show without you. Thank you. Keep spreading the word. Let's get the word out there. Let's grow the audience, not just for the benefit of us, but primarily it's you guys. We've got to get the truth out there. Khalistan is coming, but it can only come with a growing massive support. The support is growing. The momentum's building. We've got to keep on it. We've got to keep the wave, this tsunami of support that's growing bigger and bigger. We've got to keep it growing, particularly across India. So if you're watching from India, spread the word. VPNs, change your YouTube settings to a different country. You can watch us. Get more people watching us. We need to get the news out there. If you're pro-Khalistan, you're not alone. This is the message we need to get to more people who might be too afraid to speak out. You're not alone. There are millions, literally millions of Khalistan supporters right across India now. And it's not just Khalistan supporters. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Manipur, J&K, all the different states. As per my story earlier, you're not alone. Narinderjit Singh Saini says, respected Angus Dr. Guilty, thanks for an enlightening discussion. Sikhs will remain indebted to you. No, not to me. We're all in it together. There's no debts anywhere. We're all aligned. We're all fighting the same battle. Essentially, we are all soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder in this battle. And we're winning. We're winning the battle. Let's keep going. Maja Mafia, good heavens, I'm going to read my Punjabi here now, thanks to Google Translate. The Khalsa will rule. There'll be no rebellion. Everyone will find refuge. Of course, Khalistan will be a sanctuary for all. No matter what, the kingdom cannot be ruled without religion. Without religion, everyone will find refuge. God's Khalsa, God's victory. Khalistan Zindabad. Khalistan Zindabad. I hope I translated that correctly, or YouTube has. And the final word. Or words. The final words go to Gurpreet Kaur. Khalistan Zindabad. Good job. And the final emoji goes to Vaheguru Ji, which is, of course, a line of crossed kirpans. Indeed. Full strength to the Khalsa warriors. Full strength to the Khalistan movement. It's happening. As I said, things are kicking off. Big, big stories. And they only imply what's getting... It's these catalytic events that is bringing about seismic change. Seismic change is coming. India has got an interesting future ahead of it. I said 2026 was going to be a big year. I said a lot's going to happen. A lot is happening. Khalistan Zindabad indeed. Thanks for all your comments. Do keep them coming. Don't forget you can message me directly at message@satlogetv.com. But that's it for another day. That's it for another Perspectives. Thanks so much for watching. Do let me know your thoughts. Do keep the comments coming. Thank you for your continued loyalty. We're on the way. The Khalistan train has left the station. It is now reaching full speed. And on that note, I will catch you, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.